Gang, today I want you to opt in to letting our guest help you opt out. She's a warrior who has picked a big battle against the algorithm, and my money is on her. Her favorite screen is a screened-in porch, and she prefers real valleys over Silicon Valleys. She likes goat cheese and pickles, but her true food love is mushroom Alfredo pasta with her husband, Ken. She's a beekeeper, a scout leader, and she likes to skip to her loo. Please join me in welcoming back to the RO podcast, your Sherpa to an opt-out life, Erin Loechner. Erin, it's so good to see
That
you.
is my favorite part is your intros. Oh my gosh, Joey, they must take hours. So good.
Well, thank you. It's yours is easy to write. Again, I use some of you've been with us before. I used a little bit of that, put a little tweak on it, version 2.0. But Erin, I have been so excited for this conversation. You have given a real gift, I believe, to the world here with your new book coming out today. Those listening, it's June 11th, coming out today, which what a great day. You've written The Opt-Out Family. The subtitle is How to Give Your Kids What Technology Can't. I want to go into all of what it means and how we do it and all that, but will you just start with what was the genesis of, okay, I want to go in Chasing Slow. You kind of talked a little bit of the build up, and that felt like maybe like the Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings here, like you've really gone into the meat. But will you give us kind of that story of how this book came to be and maybe the years preceding that led up to it?
Yeah, of course. I wish there was a really tidy before and after, just this moment where it's like everything comes crashing down, but it's a slow burn. I think with the first book, Chasing So Much, we already talked about, I think, honestly, that was sort of a deconstructing the idea of this American dream sort of rat race. This book is really deconstructing the idea of social media rat race. Do we even need it? Do our kids need it? Is it benefiting us in any way? Can we do life better without it entirely? And I think that's sort of what was on my head when I really, probably when I had my first child, because I knew bringing her home into this, at the time we were filming the HGTV.com show, we were bringing her into this home that was also kind of a showroom. We were expected to be on at all times. I do remember this moment where my cousin's son, so we would just call him my nephew, I guess, but he was just an infant, and they came over to see the latest installation in the show and in the bedroom, and he threw up on the bedspread. And the first thought I had in my head, this is terrible, was, oh shoot, we haven't filmed that yet. We're gonna have to figure out how to fix that, how to edit it out. Rather than, oh my gosh, what do you need? Can I get you something? How, like, it was honestly, it was such a split reaction that, those ones that totally reveal your heart. And I thought, this isn't where I want to be. This isn't what I want to go. And so, kind of moving away from that, having my own child, I thought, I know I'm going to be parenting with a phone in my hand more than I want to if I keep this pace, if I keep the involvement in social media, if I keep this 1.6 million following that I'm speaking to on the regular, if I keep that kind of those inhumane interactions going, my heart is going to skip straight to that more often than not. And so I didn't want it. So my husband and I, he's very familiar with the algorithm as well. He worked in Apple's ad agency when we lived in LA, and he was in Silicon Valley in and out. And honestly, he knew the algorithm is no place for the kids. We were both very aligned in that. And so our family motto became be more engaging than the algorithm. And we decided it's not enough to say no to devices. We're going to say yes to something better. And in our house, we're just going to do it differently. And we have. And so this was the lived message that finally I wrote down.
Well, and it's, if you would have written this book certainly 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, I think people would have looked at you like you had three eyes, right? I mean, you would have looked absolutely crazy, but it seems so perfectly timed for this book to come out right now in a way that is so, people just kind of assume like, yeah, I get it. Will you talk about that kind of cultural shift and why this book now makes which, just as a side note, this is a relatively extreme approach you're recommending, but in my mind, this is the approach. I mean, this is the way, right? But I feel like people are so ready for it and ready for clarity. So I would love to hear your take on that cultural shift on why it doesn't look like you have three eyes now, and people, why they really think this makes some sense.
Yeah, and I am so grateful to the work of Jonathan Haidt from the Anxious Generation. He was
Mm.
his co-founder of Let Grow was one of my greatest sources. Lenore Skenazy, she's lovely.
Oh,
So
wow.
we have sort of been hand in hand in this message for a bit. And I will just say it was so funny when I started writing this book. The narrative was very much digital wellness. Digital well-being, sort of how do we have a relationship with tech? How do we navigate tech? All of these things that aren't wrong. They're great messages to consider and to reconsider. And yet I wanted to know, where's the book for people that just aren't willing to deal with this with their kids? They're
Mm.
just not willing to figure out how to navigate it. They just don't want it at all. Where is that book? And where is the book for the parents that are saying, yes, technology might be the future, but is this the future we want for our kids? And can we maybe
Mm.
pop in and start some sort of chain reaction now so that it's maybe something they don't ever have to deal with? To the extreme that we have had to. And so I'm grateful the research is there. We already talked about how the question is no longer, why would you do this? It's how do you do it? And
Yeah.
I didn't know that when I wrote the book. I honestly thought this would be, these interviews would be the hardest things to do because I would have to still convince people. I'm not a convincer. I'm just very much like, this is what works for me. And I thought it would be a lot more difficult, but I am so grateful for so many people who are just
Mm.
really offering a new way and coming together, because you have to do it together, and saying,
Yeah.
hey, let's think about this a little bit deeper.
Mm. It's so true. And I think that people really are now, to your point, they feel it so deeply. They know something has to happen. And the thing that is missing is something like this that gives a little bit more of a prescription on, hey, here's exactly how you do it. We had John Deloney on our show not long ago, and I asked on his call-in show, what's the common thread of, people, what are they asking? He said, they're asking two things. One, do you see me? And two, what do I do now? And so
Mm.
this whole, like, what do I do now? This is the answer. And even if you look back on, even if you look back on Jesus, like he would, he saved the woman from getting stoned, and then he identified with her, he related to her, and then he said, now go sin no more. Now here's
Mm.
what you do now. You give a direct path to it. So I would love to hear, for everybody listening, and just one of many plugs, you have to go buy this book. You have to buy this book. It's so good. If you're one of those people who have said, I know there's got to be a better way. What do I do? This is it. So that's the begin. So will you define for us, what is an opt-out family?
I love that question, and thank you. I feel like it is a very provocative term, right? And so I would never, ever, ever say that it's an all or nothing thing.
Yeah.
One of my most important messages that I want to get across is you can opt out at any time. An opt out family is not someone that has been just sort of untethered to technology for their entire lives. Look at me, I'm on a podcast with you today. So
Right.
it is simply someone that um, does what big tech does not do, right? It is someone that, so the
Mm.
algorithm is sort of this conveyor belt that we're putting, ourselves and our children on. And it's just sort of guiding us down this path. And we don't know where it ends. We could never know where it ends because
Mm.
it's not for our best interest. It's not our goal. It's Silicon Valley's goal. And so an opt-out family, just at every point of connection with technology, they pause and they look up, they look around, they assess, and they say, is this where we want to be going? An
Mm.
opt-out family is somebody that might think before signing the waiver for facial recognition at summer camp, right? They might think before signing up for the band app that their child's, extracurricular activity communicates through. It's just a way to just pause and say, hey, is there another way that we could do this? And the whole reason why it's sort of termed opt-out family is because Zuckerberg, I think it's a famous motto now. His motto is "Move fast and break things," right? And it's lovely from the sort of seat of an entrepreneur who might want to battle fear of failure and fear of risk and all of that. But for parents who are leading a family, we don't want to move fast and break things. We want to move
Mm.
slow and mend things. And the
Mm.
beauty of an opt-out family is that at any time we can always course correct, and there is so much hope in thinking deeply about where we want to go next. Just like you said,
Mm.
where do I go now? That's what an opt-out family will ask.
Yeah. For the people who, when you think about that, and Jonathan Haidt talks so much about collective action and how people doing it together, it makes it so much better. Where the individual detriment is high if you're the only one, but the collective good is great when you do it together. So, what about for the person that says, "Oh, but this is, but oh, I don't want them to be left alone. I don't want them to be the only one." What do you say to when people, because that is the big thing, like, "Oh, I don't want to be the last person." So, what do you say to the person who, if they're want to adopt this, but then they also don't want to necessarily isolate their kids?
Yeah, 100%. We have some scripts on our website. It's opt-out-family.com, but we have scripts that you can sort of just honestly plug and play. You just copy and paste them and send it out to people in your social circle to talk about this issue. Give them the research. Talk about why you're choosing that. Whatever age your kid is, maybe it's you're still hosting play dates. So hey, we're doing screen-free play dates. Here's why.
Mm,
Or if it's a high school club activity, that kind of thing. One thing that I've noticed, the message kind of snowballs into each other. And once you go first, other parents are like, thank goodness you said something. I'm not happy with where this is going and I don't know what to do about it. And honestly, we're all so flooded that it takes a lot to be the one to speak up first. We have a lot going on. It's a lot easier to just say like, all right, whatever, this one time it's fine. Um, and there are times and seasons in which that is the approach. And I think we've sort of reached that tipping point where we recognize we're not the only crazy people anymore and no one is having fun. And so
yes, right.
I was talking to a mom yesterday and she had emailed her theater group because they were communicating through, I think it was the band app also, on rehearsals and costuming and all of this. And she said, hey, I'd like to meet with a director. What should I say about why, and I gave her a script or whatever. And I just said, okay,
Mm,
listen, there are families out there that just rely on a desktop computer and an email address. And your only job is to say that you're one of them, say like, hey, I have provided my kid with an email address and a desktop computer. Is there any way that we can sort of move this communication a little bit old school? And then
mm,
raise your hand. I will sign up and do it all for you because we're recognizing these coaches are flooded too. The leaders, the teachers, the administrators. This is just what they've done because they have found it to be easier and it's more
mm,
efficient and they're in the rhythm now. So raise your hand to be the one to say, okay, if you give me everybody's email addresses, I'll set up the email list and I will send out the weekly updates or whatever you need. And inevitably what happens is that coach or that director or that theater person would say, thank you for doing that because another family asked
yes.
this same thing and I didn't have anything to tell them. And now you know another family who cares just as much as you do. So it really does.
Mm,
One thing leads into another. And once you start having the conversation and talking about it and raising your hand, other people
mm.
do come alongside you. They really, really do. And we're in it together.
I love that you said that last part, especially about the administrators and the teachers. They want it too. I really do believe that they're on the front lines. They see the detriment. And I think what you are doing in this, and when you take an act like that, basically that requires courage of you, but it gives courage to others. It gives courage to the administrator to say, oh yeah, I can do this. I was talking, and I'll actually give him a shout out by name, the head of the school where my kids go, Dr. Ansel Sanders in Knoxville at the web school, who is just a terrific leader. And he is moving towards like, okay, we got to do something about this. We were talking about the book, The Anxious Generation. And I think one reason why is because he has heard from other parents who have said, no, we want to do this. Now, there are some on the other side who, Julie Jargon in the Wall Street Journal wrote an article, I believe, that were saying like parents are the ones getting in the way of this. We all know that it would be good for there to be no phones, but some parents are getting in the way of it. But if we can shift the cultural tide, cultural is just the taken for granted assumptions of the way an organization operates. And so if you can get other people around you, because you're so right, Erin, other people want that and they just need some courage to do it. And so especially when you can remove those excuses and you can say, no, I'll be the one that manages it. So I love that. And what I love too about the scripts that you're talking about, that's really just what we need. We just need, again, it's all about clarity. And we have, this book is so great because it's putting into words some of the tensions, and it's the tactical one. Another thing I'll say about it, it would be easy to look at this book and this ethos as anti-tech. And I actually don't read this as anti-tech. You talk about the algorithm, and there are obviously like you have to name some things with truth, but I actually think this is just pro living.
Mm.
I think the way that to me, there's there's an important distinction there. Like, and again, it's even the subtitle of the book, giving your kids how to give your kids what technology can't. So I'd love that you've made that distinction. So will you talk about, you've alluded to it some, what are some of those things that we can give to our kids that just technology is incapable of giving?
Yeah, yeah. And thank you for that distinction, because you're right. We live in a world there where technology does exist. And I just don't want to play nice as much as I want to play fair. um, and so I would say, honestly, one of the reasons I wrote this book is I wanted to sort of recognize the idea that all technology isn't bad, right? If it were, we
Yeah.
wouldn't be using it. We wouldn't want it. It wouldn't have a hold or a grip on us. It does make a lot of things easier. Not that easier is better, but it does make a lot of things, and it does some things very well. So what I did with sort of the premise of the book is I wanted to sort of look at the algorithm very, very closely, do a ton of research, and figure out, why does it grab us? Why does it captivate us?
Mm,
People of all ages. What is it about these engineers that have made this experience so alluring to us that we are using it to escape from our families and our
mm,
jobs and whatever we're doing at the moment? And so I broke it down on every level. I talked to programmers and venture capitalists and people in and out of Silicon Valley, parents, teachers, all of them. And
mm,
I wanted to know, okay, from a video game designer, how do we challenge our kids without the challenge being so much that they're now demotivated?
mm,
It turns out there's a formula for that. So it's in the book. I wanted to know from a venture capitalist, um, how do you prioritize first order thinking, second order thinking, when you're figuring out sort of a new tech startup to fund? How do you find the exit strategy when it's not working anymore, so that we can play that out in our own homes, right? If we've given them a phone and it's not working, where's the exit strategy?
mm,
So I wanted to break down those formulas. I wanted to know from an influencer, how do you build trust so we can use that in our home? I wanted to know from an engineer, how do you plan with the end in sight so we can use that
mm.
in our home? So I wanted to really bring all of these concepts together that the smartphone and Silicon Valley does really, really well, and just co-opt them, steal them, use them for our
Yeah.
playbook instead of, so we're meeting
Mm,
our goals instead of meeting their goals. And that was the whole
mm.
premise. And I hope I did it.
Well, will you tell us some of those things? Again, the book goes into such good detail on them. Will you tell us a little bit about those things that maybe will shock us in about the algorithm, how we actually are being manipulated, our activities and how we view the world? All these things actually are being manipulated. Will you talk about some of those we'll call them tips and tricks on how they are engaging with us, how the algorithm is actually changing how we behave and how we think?
Yes, yes. One of the really interesting points of research is on biometrics. Are you familiar with biometrics?
A little
Okay.
bit.
It's just the idea that the capacity is built in now at this point. Technology has sort of gone above and beyond. And so it exists. But biometrics are just using our body, our face, like all of those little tells we have, to read us as people, right? So deep fakes exist now because
Mm,
we have enough information on what our face looks like at any given moment from any given angle, that you can create a video that talks exactly like someone else. And all of that technology is there. And so when I was really researching biometrics, specifically with TikTok, um,
mm,
one thing that their algorithm does better than any other algorithm is creating an experience of, a lot of people, when they talk about TikTok, they will say things like, um, it knows what I like before I know what I like, or it recommends things that I never knew I wanted. And
mm,
TikTok has the ability to use biometrics probably better than any other app because the information is there. They do a lot of eye challenges, a lot of people challenges, a lot of things like that. So anyway, biometrics, it's a whole field that if you want to really ruin your Saturday afternoon, you should research. And yet we have the capability to do that so much better in our own home because if we
mm,
will just look in our kids' eyes, there's so much information in there, way more information than TikTok will ever know or want to know or get. Um, they have tells, right? We know our kids best, and we know when something's a little bit off. We know when they're sort of processing something other than what they're telling us, or they're feeling heavier than usual. We
mm,
know all that. We have biometrics at our disposal to use for good in our own homes. And so all of that really alarming knowledge that comes with the research, if we just think about it a little differently, if we just shift the approach from like, oh, tech is out to get us, to, hey,
Mm,
yeah, that's a great strategy and we can do it even better. That's where I want us to be, because I don't want us to be afraid of where we've been or where we're heading. I want us to feel
yeah.
hopeful for where we can go. And
Mm.
that's what this is about.
That's so right. It really is so easy to get kind of bogged down into it without looking at the hope around us. Because there's what we don't want to do, and this is what you're proposing. The premise of this book is just not resigning to what we're seeing around us or what our experience has been up to this point. We don't have to resign to it. It is not inevitable. Felicia Wu Song, I interviewed her a few months back, and she said the exact same thing. This is not inevitable. It does not have to be inevitable, and yet we go along. Oh, this is just going to be how it is. But if we can begin with ourselves, that's such a powerful thing. Uh, when you talk about, and again, I just said let's not focus on the muck and mire, but I'm going to take us into the muck and mire here. You talk about five areas where the algorithm is affecting us in brain and body development, mental health, reality distortion, physical safety, and addiction. We pick out maybe one of those and how this algorithm is. It's one thing to say that all these things are happening. It's another thing on why it shouldn't be happening. Will you tell us a little bit about some of the detrimental effects that we're seeing as a result of the algorithm?
Yeah, I mean, pick one. It has universally changed how we are and interact with each other in such a short
Mm,
amount of time. And I am grateful that we're at the point where we do have really hard research and really hard numbers on what this is doing, particularly to young girls. I will say, I think there's the research points to with young children, boys, it's gaming, and with girls, it's
yeah.
social media is kind of that
Mm,
sticking point. Honestly, one of the statistics I found that was the most interesting to me, because I was coming at this from a place of hope, was that 71% of parents believe that smartphones do more harm than good. And
wow.
when I read, that was way higher than what I thought it would be. These are parents that have already given their kids technology. These are some parents that maybe haven't yet, but we are overwhelmingly the majority of parents that want to do this differently. And yet it is such an uphill battle, and we just don't know
Mm,
how or don't have the tools. And so I am very hopeful. I am very hopeful that there
yeah.
is a lot of muck and mire, but it's not anything that we can't trudge through together.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Why don't these? I'm going to stay a little negative for a second, I promise, and I won't be too long. But why, knowing the effect, let's just take, not to call out too many, but knowing the effect, the Instagram, the Facebook files, knowing the effect it's having on teenage girls, for example, why don't these companies, why are they not changing? Why are they not doing the right thing? And again, I know I'm casting a broad net, but why is they have such a potential to do good and knowing these detrimental effects? So why aren't they changing and doing the right things?
Yeah. Joey, the people that I talk to that work for Facebook or Meta or X, or,
Hmm.
a lot of people I spoke with sort of had the job of, it was kind of catcher in the rye stuff. It was like you find this one really terrible content, and then there's thousands more, right there. It is a big job. I do think that they have
Mm.
outgrown their own pants over here. And I think I would not ever, I would argue that the system is set up for them to win. They're a business, right? They want time on device. They want our attention. They want our lives. It's very interesting. A lot of the programmers I spoke with talked about two waves of the algorithm. The first wave really wanted to capture our attention, and the second wave really wants to capture our intimacy. And
Wow.
that really hit home, because we're seeing that now. We're seeing this idea of, uh, I just read toward the end of the book, when I was writing the conclusion, I just got a pitch from Replica, which is an AI model that will replicate who you want your best friend to be. So you just plug in all of these traits and these good habits and good hobbies that you want your best friend to have, that your best friend doesn't have, because no
Mm.
human is perfect. And yet you put them out and they plug out this sort of perfect companion for you to seek advice from and to encourage you. And um, oh, that crushed my soul in so many levels, because
Mm.
it's playing, we're now playing the job of God for fun, right? We're
Yeah.
creating people that won't fall short. So um,
Mm.
which they will on in many ways. And yet, um, what I still, even with all of that knowledge and all of that research, I didn't meet anyone where I thought, you're out to get us. You know the plan, and
Huh.
these are humans too. I think for a lot of them, it did get, I wouldn't say this for everyone, but it did get out of hand. I think some people joined Silicon Valley to do something better. I think they knew,
Yeah.
they saw the problems and they wanted to fix it from the inside. I think other people I spoke with didn't realize until things got really bad. And then their job was to kind of make it not seem as bad as it was. and
Mm.
and I think that's sort of human nature, right? We sort of try to justify our actions to make things feel better than what they do. And I would say now, the people that I still keep in touch with, they get it. Some have left, many have left, recognizing
Mm.
this is a bigger beast than we're willing to sort of, we don't want to go down the ship at all.
Yeah. That,
So I don't know why. I don't know why it's happening. I mean, I know why it's happening on a grand scale, but I think individually
yeah.
it is very easy to sort of criticize all these people that have built these tools without recognizing
Mm.
that these were college kids in dorm rooms, and did they even know what they were
Huh.
doing? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I
Yeah.
won't be the judge of that, but someone will.
Well, I like your perspective there. That again, I just hold it. I know you hold this too. We just so desperately crave real connection. We I mean, and even when you just talked about the replicate, what was it called?
Replica. Yeah.
Replica. Even that is a cry for connection. That right. That's a, and it's just like anything. I mean, it's fool's gold. It's not real. It may look like gold, but it's not. But it just means that we want it. We want that connection so badly. So I tend to agree with you here that these are individuals, these are humans who have wants and needs and want to experience intimacy, but they don't maybe not know how to. But it's just because they're so starved of it, that's why we're creating these replicas for it.
Mm.
No pun and no pun intended there. So what do we? So I would love to go through. What are some things, some proposals of yours? What are some ways that we can begin to become an opt-out family? Whether it's through your rhythms and education, and then you talk about studying your kids, and then I'll follow up with one of my favorite parts of the book, which was talking about Chat GPT, which has a different spin than most people want. But we'll get to that in a second. But what are some ways that we can begin to become opt-out families in these rhythms in our homes?
Yeah, honestly, my what shifted our home the most was when we kind of you start with us, right? You start with the parents. And so one thing I tell a lot of parents is that parental controls are not just for kids. You can turn parental controls on yourself. And so
Mm.
one thing that I did with my phone, and this made all the difference in the world, is I took I did switch to a flip phone, then I switched back to a flip phone. It was a whole thing. Anyway, so I now have sort of it is a smartphone, and everything is turned off. All the parental controls are off. So it just has text, phone, and I kept on maps, right? I know. I go back and forth all the time, but I took out the camera. I took off obviously I quit social media. I'm not on there anymore. So it's been about 3 years off there. And I think for me, making that shift, along with one other big shift that I think a lot of us tend to overlook, is um, I made my phone wallpaper and my phone sort of lock screen just black. It's straight black. There's no beach scene photo. There's no cute
Mm.
family photos of my kids or whatever. I just depersonalized the whole experience. We have a video on our site on how to do this. If anybody is like, how do you do that? I don't get it. But you depersonalize your phone, because then it becomes a phone, not your phone. And Joey, that made such a big
Oh.
difference in just the way that I thought about it. When it's your phone, it's something you need, right? You grab it when you keys, phone, wallet. You grab it when you leave, no matter where you're going. And when it was just a phone, I could stop and say like, hey, I'm just going to the park with my kids. We're just walking. Do I even need my phone? Or we're just going to the library. It's right
Mm.
there. Do I need my phone? There's a landline. If there's an emergency, I'll call. It just changed everything. And so depersonalizing your own device is a big thing that we can do as parents. the other thing is then it's not, then you can teach your kid all of those things you want to teach them about. How do you make a phone call? How do you send a text message? How do you, like, all of those things that I think we sort of make excuses for giving our kids their own smartphone a little earlier.
Right.
Digital literacy, all that. You can do some of that on your own sort of dumbed down phone. If you're comfortable offering it to, say, your 12, 13, 14-year-old or whatever, to make a call. Now it's the family phone, right? So that's one thing that we did that worked really well. The other thing is making your tools single use only. So I think one of the things that we get into with the smartphone with kids in particular, it's a Swiss Army knife of
Yeah.
activities and entertainment, and it's your social life, and it's just all of these things all in one. So many burdens that we can't even begin to carry. Certainly our children can't. And so making everything single use, like if you did already give your child a device, or if you're kind of on the fence, which I would encourage everyone to read. I think it's chapter 3. You'd know better than I would actually, but sort of just kind of deconstructing all those reasons why we do give our
Yeah.
kids a phone, and then kind of giving some other ideas on that before you even make that decision. But if you're already there and you've already made that decision, just think about how you want your child to use that device. Do you want your child to use the device the same way that you do? If not, then there's some areas to grow. And if so, then great, you're going to be an awesome role model for them. And so thinking through making everything single use, I give the example in the book, iPads. We have a very old iPad, and gosh, it does have a piano playing app on it. That's the only thing that we could get to run, which is a blessing, because what happened was we had plugged it into the piano player. It's plugged in. It doesn't move along the house. The kids are not attracted to it by any stretch, because it just plays piano. It just does scales. And what happened that I didn't expect to happen was, as my toddler grew up, so my kids are 12, 8, and 4. The 12-year-old and the 8-year-old have both played piano using this app. So again, you talk about an opt-out family. It's different for everybody. My 4-year-old now will see kids out in a restaurant with their iPad out, and she automatically assumes they're playing like keyboards. They're playing the piano. They think it's like this like portable piano. And it's kind of a beautiful thing, because it just puts the child in the driver's seat of, do I want to use this or not? Not, do I want to play? Do I want to bypass boredom? Do I want to be entertained? But do I want to play the piano? Yes. Then let's sit down at the piano and let's play the piano. And it's just sort of using technology to support those habits and rhythms that we want in our house.
I love that. You said something in there that I really like when you talked about the concept of depersonalizing your phone. And I couldn't help but think of the parallel between the way our phones are dehumanizing us. And so it's almost like you flipped it, right? They're dehumanizing us. Everybody talks about that. Andy Crash talks about that a bunch. Like, they're dehumanizing us. And so what if instead we depersonalize them so that we could become more human? So I love that idea. I'm going to go switch to black on my background right after this. And I like that, the A phone versus my phone.
Yeah, I like that.
Shockingly, this is going to shock a lot of people, you are very pro Chat GPT, right? But not the Chat GPT that we all think of. Will you talk to us about the Chat GPT that you love?
I do. Well, so in my research of Chat GPT, yes, I'm not going to get into the mire there, but that was a very enlightening experience. A lot of that is in the book as well. But what I really tried to do is just give us some sort of sticking points to consider and to have top of mind when we're thinking about, why is the algorithm not the path we want to go? And it's strictly because it's bypassing our own goals. And so I thought ChatGPT is goals, principles, truth. So chat through, as a family, what are your goals, what are your principles, and what is your truth? And goals meaning the surface things, right? Like, I want to learn how to make sourdough or whatever as a family, right? The principle is the thing behind that. So it is, why do I want to learn how to make sourdough? Okay, well, maybe it's because I would like to be more self-sufficient, or I would like to figure out how to get around this food restriction or allergy, or maybe I want to give away sourdough to all of my neighbors, as Christmas gifts or whatever. kind of the thing behind the thing. And then the truth is just something you can put always to. So if your goal and your principle is, we'll just keep going with the sourdough strategy. Maybe the truth is just, we will always make things with our hands. We will
Mm,
always do things a slower way, or we will always make time for hospitality. Some of those sort of, just overarching umbrella of ideas that keep you in line, moving toward
mm,
your sort of your vision for what your family could be. And the reason that kind of laying it out that way is because things always get sticky, right? Priorities always rub against other priorities. So, maybe one of and that's what I found with technology, that it was so easy
mm,
to fall into the easier priorities. So if your family values um, open communication, but it's easier to send a text, you're going to send a text. Unless you have really gone through some of these goals and principles together as, hey, we're
mm,
just doing this a different way, and let's practice together. Not that we're going to get it right 1,000,000%, but let's start practicing now.
mm. And I think that my initial reaction I had as I was hearing that was the intentionality that it requires to do that, and almost in an answer that I almost laughed at myself and saying like, well, gosh, that would take a lot of time. You'd have to really slow down to do it. And then I thought, oh, well, that's kind of the point. Yeah, with the frenetic pace we're all running at, that's not really practical. However, if we implement what you propose, then it is possible, and we can slow down a little bit. We can slow down, we can mend things, we can really go slower, and then we're able to be more intentional. And then to all to your point, where we're not all of a sudden realizing that we're bystanders to our own lives, to our own decisions, that we're the ones that are making those decisions. I'd love to hear, we've talked about the problem and kind of where things are going wrong. You've talked about some of the rhythms of, what to do very practically, and the book goes in depth on those. Will you talk to us about the life that's on the other side
Mhm.
of those decisions? Will you talk to us about kind of this beauty of the world around us, and the beauty that you see when you begin to implement some of these things?
Yeah. I mean, one of the really interesting things I noticed leaving social media was um, there was sort of a curiosity about people that I didn't have before. It's
Mm,
and this is why it's so important, I think, for kids and teens to be able to learn this step before they can engage in sort of social media conversations, because there's a real risk of like the ambiguity, uncertainty part of having a conversation with someone new. And what I found when I was on social media, I felt like I was so well versed in reading people, right? And
huh.
figuring out, oh, you listened to this podcast, you posted about this, you voted for this person. I probably feel like I know you. And I feel like we should probably steer the conversation in this direction. Um, versus someone I don't know what you posted yesterday. I don't know if you had a baby in the time that I saw you last. I mean, I know nothing about your life because um, we're not in community together. And so it makes your world a little bit smaller, a little bit more. My definition of community is somebody that I can bring a casserole to. And that's a very limiting definition, right? But it's always served me well because when I
Hmm.
think about it, I don't really need to know what the mom in Minnesota thinks about this particular child rearing practice, or I don't really need to know um, things that are beyond my scope, not in a way to be ill informed, but in a way to be unformed, right? To be
Mm,
unmanipulated or unsort of encumbered by other people's thoughts and opinions that I never would have come across 100 years ago, and maybe never should have. I
mm,
think there is something that we do as people, and age old Garden of Eden stuff, right? Like where we just assume that knowledge is wisdom, and that more information is going to cause like the better result, right? Um,
mm,
and yet I found that when I was kind of being led down the path of an algorithm, it really did replace being led by the spirit for me. It did. It
mm,
was sort of like I thought them one and the same, right? Like, oh, I was kind of had this in my head, and then I saw this thought, and maybe I'm being led this direction. No, I wasn't. The algorithm was leading me that direction, but there was nothing spirit led about that. And now there is
Mm,
such a blank slate that when I do feel a tug in a certain direction, I know for a fact, being a believer, I know it's the Holy Spirit, and that that clarity has been just a wildly beautiful way to live. And I could never really account for the opportunities lost from not being it really involved in technology, but I can absolutely look to the fruits gained. And
yeah.
it is an abundant life across the
Mm,
board, on every level.
wow. I mean, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, it really does. As things kind of quiet down, you can attune yourself. I mean, talk, the story in the Old Testament about just like, was it Elijah goes out to like hear from God, and there's an earthquake, and it says, but God was not in the earthquake, and then there was thunder, but God was not in the thunder, and then it said, but then a still small voice. God was in the still small voice, and so you think about what are those still small voices that we just have to quiet ourselves down to be able to hear, to be able to decipher. um, One last question for people who hear this and say, I just don't think that's possible or practical for me. What would you say to somebody like that who hears this and really wants everything you're describing, just says, I just don't think it's practical in my life? How would you address that?
I think it depends on what area. I mean, I really would. I'm not afraid to push back anymore. I think it's important to really get to the kernel of what practicality do you mean? Do you mean it's going to make
Mm,
life a little harder or a messier? I think there are certainly situations in which this is going to be a lot harder. I talk to a lot of people co-parenting who they're living in two different households, and one spouse is very aligned with the messaging and the other one is pro tech or all tech, and not even about tech or no tech, but they're on different pages with this, and that is a trickier thing. And um to those to those situations where you really don't feel like you have a lot of control over your child's tech usage or your own or whatever, um I would just recommend taking a cue from Meta and opening a little suggestion box right next to your RO box, actually. But where, honestly, Meta has a really great reporting system. If you see something online that makes you uncomfortable, or that shouldn't be there, or that is disinformation, or what, you can report it anonymously. And
mm,
I always encourage parents to do the same. If your child is actively on social media, make space for them to talk to you about it. And a lot of times
mm,
for kids, that's an anonymous, because there's so many layers to it. A kid might say like, well, I saw the thing because I wasn't supposed to be on my phone, or it was my like friend's phone and I wasn't supposed to have it. And so I know I'm going to get in trouble. So I don't want to say anything. And that's when we get
yeah.
into a really rough spot with the kids. And so, um, yeah, I would say just yeah, next to your RO box, have a suggestion box,
Huh.
or just even I think of two-factor notification, where if your account is hacked, you have to go through two systems of sort of proving your identity. Well, we could do that kind of thing in our relationships as well, where if your child has a smartphone, um, make sure they have two people that they can go to in case of anything that is happening that is not okay in that experience, right? So
Mm,
maybe it's not you, and that's going to be a hard sort of realization, but maybe they have a phone mentor. One of the moms I talked to said,
mm,
before I gave my child a phone, I said, you can have a phone, but you are now having weekly meetings with Aunt Cindy, okay? This is what you're going to be doing. And they said okay, and so Aunt Cindy was sort of the phone mentor, right? And I think one thing that we do is we assume that all of those reasons why we give our child technology, we forget to kind of play them out. So
mm,
it does sound like, in the case of Aunt Cindy and a suggestion box and doing all these things, it sounds like, well, that does sound more work than it's worth, right? Now we're having weekly meetings, or now I'm sort of checking all their socials, or I'm checking their text messages, or we're navigating this thing together. To do it right, yeah, you have to navigate it together. Or you can decide, I want to use that time to meet my family's goals. So we're
mm.
going to not do it. And it's going to be hard. That doesn't mean it's wrong. But we're going to just try it differently and see if it works. And then if there is an overwhelming reason why it's not working, well, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And
Yeah.
that's okay too.
Mm. I love that you're unapologetic about saying, even even the premise of the question, is it even practical? I hear your maybe internal monologue saying, yeah, dum dum, of course, Joey, of course, like it's like, what are you thinking? Like, why would you go through as a bystander to this algorithm? Like, that's not practical either for the success of your child. That's not practical for your family. So I love that you're unapologetic with this. And I love you giving clarity to it. And, there's a line at the end of the book that I want to read that I just think it's so beautiful, and I'd love you to expound on it, or we could even just let it be because it's just such a beautiful line. You say, may we never again scroll through someone else's life without attending to ours.
Mhm.
And here we are, just scrolling through other people's lives, and we've a line we say a bunch is that if we don't do anything, this will be the first generation of kids who will die with more of other people's memories than memories they create on their own. And what a devastating thought. So I really just maybe with that want to thank you for being unapologetic and for being direct and for giving all of us the courage to attend to our lives versus scrolling through others. It's just a gift that you've given us in this book, and I'm so excited for everybody to read it.
Thank you, Joey. Thank you so much. I'm holding hands with you guys over here. You're doing great things, and I'm grateful for people that are gaming the system on the other end. So thank you. Thank you.
So everybody needs to go to optoutfamily.com. Is that right?
Yep.
Optoutfamily.com. Need to buy the book today. Need to follow Erin on Instagram. Just kidding. She's not on Instagram. Optoutfamily.com. Everybody, it is June 11th. Please get a copy of this book right now. We'll link to everything in the show notes. Go to Amazon, go wherever you can buy books. But Erin, thank you for this book, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Joey. Thanks for having me.